we really have a stellar panel here, and I'm pretty sure the conversations they're going to have are something that you're going to learn from each other. And, interestingly, when we look at powering growth through collaboration, I remember, like, in my very first visit to Chennai, and I was a young reporter that time, visiting the Ford factory here, I wanted to pick up something from my mother. I was just few months into the profession. I said, okay, let me pick up. So I asked my colleague, like, what should I pick up? He said, go for Nalli saris. Frankly, I never bought a sari before this. So I walked into a store. I just told, okay, show me Nalli saris. So the gentleman looked at me. He realized that I have never bought a sari. I don't know much about Nalli saris. And he just handed me, he scribbled something on a piece of paper and said, please go there. He shared with me the address of the Nalli store. And I went there, picked up something for my mother. He could have actually sort of shown me anything. I could have picked it up. But he was so kind, and I still remember that small stories from the gentleman, It shows that, look, they were competing for the same space, a sari. But they were, since as a customer, I was looking for an early sari, he directed me to the right place, and that stayed with me. Similarly, I would like to know from each one of you, and it's a common to all of you, any anecdotes that you'd like to share that where you have collaborated maybe with your competitor, and there's an anecdote that there's a lesson that you have learned from those collaborations.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of examples of that. And to start with, there's so much growth happening in India, and it's such an exciting place to be. And growth doesn't happen in silos, right? Growth happens at the seams and at the confluences of industries when collaboration happens. I am in the textile industry, and I find that the real threat to us is not that we collaborate, it is that we don't. Okay. The real threat to our industry is anyone that is able to provide quality and technology and scale and speed at scale. So that is China or Vietnam or Turkey. So how do we compete with that? So there's a lot of textile clusters, especially in Tamil Nadu. There's Karur, there is Tirupur. So I think those are classic examples of collaboration. And that is where we leave our own silos, because if we are competing, then we can't be in the silo. So that is where we leave our silos and we collaborate. One of our levers of competition in the textile industry, in my opinion, is ESG. It is the environmental stewardship.
Yeah.
So me being a textile company, how do I champion the environment sitting in a silo, right? So then I have to go reach out to the technology and the people that are working in ESG. Radical transparency in the supply chain is another big thing. So when it comes to that, I have to collaborate with the entire supply chain. So I have to start with the cotton farmer.
Absolutely.
And go up the supply chain, the dyers, the spinners, the weavers. So we collaborate all through the supply chain. And in my experience, what I've realized is if you want a slice of the pie, then you compete. But if you want to make the size of the pie itself bigger, then you collaborate.
Absolutely. Bobby, in your case, like you've been a developer and it's okay, whatever. So, in the developer ecosystems, we see that a lot of collaborations happen, especially if you're entering a new city or you are sort of, you're competing, you are competitors, but also collaborating with a lot of your ecosystem players. How does it sort of play out in your, is there something like, how do you figure out, how do you assess the suitability of partners? How do you sort of figure out, is there a do and don't mantra that you have in mind, like, that works for you?
A very interesting question. I say that to be an entrepreneur, you have to be a magician. You need to know everything. And collaborating today is the key. Competitions don't help. Having said that, I would like to say that in collaboration, it is just not collaborating with your peers, it's also collaborating with the community. For example, we are doing a development, and practically we are collaborating with the community there. We are trying to build a drain, and we have to take all the villagers and the panchayat leaders into confidence, collaborate with them, and only then we can build the road, build the drain, and then by building the drain, we are actually helping the community at large, and we can make the road wider. So collaboration is at all levels. Another thing, Mr. Anand is here. He is from Thirumalai Charities, which runs the Thirumalai Hospital. Now we are planning to do a retirement home. And we are good at hard infrastructure. That is, we can provide the buildings and all that. But we don't have the soft skills. Soft skills consists of two when you're running a retirement home. One is having a hospitality partner. Another one is the health partner. So actually, we are reaching out to Thirumalai charities to ask them whether they can take up the health part of. We are in discussions with them, and we hope we can carry this forward. So collaboration is the key today. Thank you.
Any take that you have?
Well, yeah, I represent, like you said, a charity trust where community health is, one of our biggest programs. And I think for trusts like us, there's nothing called competition.
Absolutely.
Right? So, like she said, the only pie is the trust and the goodwill that we build with all the communities, and that's an unlimited pie. More partners are welcome, more the better. Again, there are different kinds of partners who've been with us over the last 55 years of our existence. One is, of course, financial partners. That's something that's very, very critical, especially when you're planning to serve at the grassroots. Other kind of collaboration, again, we can break it down into two parts. One is collaboration within the industry. For example, let's say one of the programs we're working on is addressing preventable blindness in the community.
Okay.
And I think for somebody like Arvind Ahaya Hospital in Chennai, they're probably, I wouldn't even say best in India, one of the best in the world.
Absolutely.
So, we just partner with them where, the goal is the same. It's about how do you ensure that, you're making sure that the population is well aware about, how to prevent blindness in future. So, that's one program which we've been doing since probably about 8-9 years now. And I'm sure it's going to continue for the next 50-60 years. And the other kind of collaboration is where innovation comes into play. Like one of our areas is women empowerment and community health at the same time. We partnered with the football academy in Chennai.
Okay.
So with them, we are actually running a program called Just for Girls, where we have all rural girls from the age 6 to 16, where we use football as an entry point for them to look at involving themselves in the community in a much bigger way. So they are advocates when they go back home telling their grandfathers, okay, eat less sugar. So, this kind of collaboration where, nobody would have, it's not thinkable to have a hospital or somebody collaborate with the football agency.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, those are things that will definitely evolve over time. And, like I said, I think collaboration, like you also mentioned, that's the only way to go forward in terms
and
of...
it's totally thinking out of the box, the way you approach, it's the idea is to it's also how do you reach the community? How do you reach be it community or market? How do you reach them? You can reach them through a community action. You can reach them through a collaboration of maybe competitors,
That's true. That's
but
true.
the end goal has to be sort of very visible and everybody I think needs to see the end goal. Everybody has to the stakeholders have to touch and feel the end goal. So they also are a stakeholder they became a stakeholder in the whole narrative and the story.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Please.
So I was just thinking there's one of these terms, it's one of a favorite word of mine is co-opetition.
Yes.
Where you collaborate with the competitor.
Yes.
And the Apple iPhone is the best example for that because I think until 2015, they were buying their semiconductor chip from Samsung.
Samsung, yeah.
And then now it's from the Taiwan Semiconductor company. And then they also buy their OLED screens, I think even now, from Samsung. So what they've done there is not a threat to them because they're collaborating because Samsung has the scale and the technology and the speed.
Exactly.
But then they're able to compete on their differentiators, which is the Apple brand and the ecosystem and the customer service and the experience and the design.
We see that in the automobile industry also. If you look at it, automobile industry, many of the brands, like Maruti, for example, has some of the brands made by other, same model being made by other competition. So it's not something it's not taboo per se. And the idea is the market should grow. That is the whole idea. You have been a serial entrepreneur, though you come from a legacy business, a 70, 80-year-old business. Take us through some of the ways, because businesses, especially legacy businesses, family businesses, are known to work in silos. Over time, they develop silos. How do you sort of, from your own experience, how do you break those silos or mold them to the new mindset, business mindset? Can you take us through some of your experiences?
Yeah, so I belong to a group of companies that are 80 years old. And we are now today proudly third generation and family owned. My grandfather started the businesses. So it's this constant straddling of the old and the new. I'm part of the legacy business, but I've also started my own businesses in the past. The siloed way of working is definitely, it exists in older businesses because that is simply how it was done. And that is something that we are consciously trying to change. And in that exercise of trying to change it, what I have learned is that the value of cooperation has to trickle down through the ecosystem of the company. Every stakeholder must be taught the importance of that. Every HOD now, we are having meetings, and every HOD is now being given KPIs and KRAs, where collaboration is now one point on which we're assessing them.
Interesting. So do you also need to sort of break the silos? I mean to say structurally within, because being a legacy organization, there would be practices which have been following for years, multiple years, And when you come in as a third generation entrepreneur, you would be looking things differently. So how do you sort of align that? Is there somewhere the gap that you feel and need to, because there are people issues which crop up. How do you manage the people issues here?
Yeah, I think the people issue often is one of hierarchy.
Yeah.
Because in a legacy organization, there's a very strict hierarchy. And I find that the more modern organizations, especially tech, it's a flatter hierarchy. So I think if we're able to change the org structure just a little bit also, that will help with this, tackling this issue.
Bobby, in terms of the space that you work in, are there any waves next, especially sort of especially we are seeing a lot of brand loyalties getting diluted. People are sort of not aligned to brands now. Since you have platforms, online platforms, which are selling multiple brands, brand loyalties are getting diluted. In such a scenario, how do you sort of build a business? When you see brand loyalties getting diluted and there's competition coming from everywhere. The next competitor could be a startup, founded by a 24, 25-year-old. How do you sort of build your brand in that situation? How do you do business in that situation?
These are my thoughts, maybe very different from others. In my industry, that is in property development, in reality, brand still matters.
Okay.
Brand matters because, people are putting their money, hard-earned money, even the future money they are putting in to buy a property. And this is property development is not technology-driven. This is like hard infrastructure. The developer or the builder has to, toil for about 2 years or 3 years and provide the customer what he has promised. So brand loyalty is very high in our business, and I don't think it's going to disappear anytime soon. So, like as a property developer, we have to do everything to protect our brand. And actually, I am a first generation entrepreneur coming from a tier 3 town. One of the threats I really see is, any day somebody, a big developer from a big city is going to come in, and his brand is really going to give us a run for our money. Unless we can really show value, it is something. So, brand is something very important in our industry. These are my thoughts.
But just to take the conversation forward, you took the example of a big developer entering your city.
Yeah.
We have seen a lot of North Indian developers, big brands coming to South. They're not done very well. Not all of them have done well. But is there a sort of does brand give you that loyalty? That
In the sense, what I will say is, when a new developer comes into town, there's a lot of scrutiny. You can be big, but if you have not delivered, and today, how Madam was talking, the world is flat. Information is available. So even before a developer comes and sets his office, people will know what this guy has done in Gurgaon, whether he has delivered in Delhi or in NCR or wherever. So it is also important for a developer to have a track record where he has developed. So if you have been a developer, you can hold your ground if you deliver what you have promised, and people have to see value. Ultimately, it's all value for money. So that's also important, but brands do matter.
But have you had the thought crossed your mind that maybe you could collaborate with a bigger brand?
Yeah, definitely. Because as a local player, we have many advantages.
Yes.
Because we already have historical land banks.
Yes.
And if I am able to collaborate with a large developer, there are a lot of things our company can learn. So definitely we are open to collaborating, and we ourselves are scouting for some partnerships which are meaningful. And it should be meaningful not only for us, primarily for the customer.
Absolutely. Anand, if I can come to you, I was going through your work that you did during the COVID times, and that's well reported, and you did excellent work during COVID time where you was there any leadership experiences in terms of, can you share with us some of the key takeaways from a leadership point of view? What were the lessons that you learned? Because you worked in the community during COVID time, people were distressed, you went out, reached out to them, and the trust has been very, and people are very appreciative of the work that you did. Could you take us through some of the leadership lessons that you learned during that time?
Sure, yeah. COVID has been a learning experience, not just for hospitals, for everybody.
Yeah.
And of course, hospitals being at the front line, I think they would have, including us, learned a lot more than most other industries. In fact, you're speaking about hierarchy, right? One of the things that I've experienced is healthcare is very, very hierarchy driven, especially the medical side of healthcare.
Yes.
Because, that's the way it has to be run, because we are talking of patient lives here. One thing that happened during COVID was, of course, all the senior physicians, they had to be cocooned themselves, because, we didn't want them to be exposed to the vulnerability.
Absolutely.
So the entire hospital was managed by pretty young doctors who would probably just come out of college, but they've seen enough patients. Obviously, they have not seen anything like COVID. And for the first time, there was nobody senior around to tell them, what line of treatment should I follow.
Yeah.
And that was when, I think, just like how video conferencing and video picked up, digital way of learning picked up for all industries. In healthcare, I still remember, a lot of doctors, young doctors, when they see a patient, what should they do next? They would get on a video call, the consultant sitting at home would probably tell them what to do. So the entire top-down model got shifted during COVID. And that was one interesting observation. Of course, and two was, even for us, our focus until COVID was non-communicable diseases. So we used to do a lot of work on diabetes, hypertension, osteoporosis, anything that can focus on preventive health in the villages. But with COVID, I mean, there was no question of looking at non-communicable diseases anymore. So the entire hospital had to be converted to being COVID ready. And so, I mean, there was a lot of learning. I mean, from a leadership standpoint, I mean, one thing that we figured was, I mean, when push comes to shove, I mean, everybody in the hospital, I mean, wouldn't mind putting their life online to save somebody else's life. I mean, even if it's a basic ground stuff or somebody doing the maintenance work, I mean, they had to follow all protocols, like, wearing a full safety gear and everything. But still, I mean, I know people who used to tell their houses were obviously not happy with them going to work during COVID, but that never bothered them. I mean, for them it was, I mean, I have to save somebody's life who's coming in. So, I mean, that level of loyalty, and I wouldn't call it loyalty, but more of commitment to their job is something that I learned during COVID in a hospital. So, of course, I mean, there are a million other learnings, but these would probably be the top, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Visalakshi, one thing interestingly you mentioned about, competition and cooperation happening together. There are also intangibles when you are collaborating with somebody. There are a lot of intangibles in terms of how much, say, when you come to innovation, when you have resilience, relevance, how do you sort of measure those? How do you sort of look at those criterias in terms of you are collaborating with somebody, but how do you measure those? How do you sort of come to those? Because those are some of the reasons why we find collaborations also fail. So maybe each one of you could share your thoughts on why collaborations fail and one should be mindful of them.
I think at the outset, it may seem like a good idea, but at the end of the day, what is the cost of the collaboration? Are you able to pass it on to the customer? And will the customer accept it? So in my industry, for example, so we make textiles for the home. And in that part of the business, there's all kinds of new innovations. There's a technology that you can apply on your textiles, polyester textiles, that allows the polyester to disintegrate and biodegrade very quickly. Otherwise, polyester will stay in the ground in a landfill for, I think, thousands of years.
Absolutely.
So that's a very interesting technology. But if I wanted to collaborate with that company that has this innovation, then it comes down to costing. Because how much is it going to cost? And ultimately, if I use this, what does my product cost? And if my customer will accept that cost.
Bobby, any thoughts? Why collaborations fail? What was your observations?
Yeah. My take on collaboration, again, specifically regarding my domain of work, the biggest collaborations happen in a property developer is a joint venture along with the landowner.
Absolutely.
So, this is something very important because through the life cycle of the project, the landowner and the developer should be in sync. If some, major or smaller disputes come up, it can jeopardize the whole project and it can put a lot of the buyers of these properties at risk. So it's very important that, the landowner and the developer are on the same page and both of them, hold on very sacredly the terms they have agreed upon till the end of the project. Thanks.
Anand, any thoughts?
Yeah, based on my experience, I mean, collaboration sometimes fails because, the end objective of the partners are different. I mean, normally everybody gets into some kind of collaboration because, they have some end game in mind. Sometimes that changes over time. I mean, for example, let's say for a not-for-profit organization like us, end game, to take, coming back to the example of preventing blindness. I mean, if that's the end game, let's say I'm serving 160,000 people, of which I want to make sure that not more than 2% of the senior citizens actually end up with cataracts or, end up with blindness later. Whereas another partner, after 3 years, 4 years, maybe sustainability could be an issue for them. Maybe their priorities change. So sometimes it can happen that priorities of collaborators change over time, which is the first stumbling block. I mean, rest are all symptoms. I mean, I'm sure once you take the downhill path, then there's no return, it just goes downhill.
Absolutely. Let me, one interesting, like you come from a legacy business, third generation. So are there collaborations within the business groups itself, or how does it work out?
Yeah, so we have spinning, weaving, home textiles. We also run educational institutions. So technological collaborations happen with yarn, for example. So in home textiles, I want to weave banana fiber. So I will go to the yarn mill and I will have a meeting with my home textile team and the spinning team and then the sourcing team. We will try to source the pineapple fiber. Technically, can you do it? How can you not do it? Costing. So we do collaborate up and down the value chain in that sense. But one of my favorite collaborations that we do within the Tyagaraja group is with the college.
Okay.
So with Tyagaraja Engineering College, I'm always trying to bring them into meetings when we have product development, because we are now trying to see how we can do self-charging fabrics, fabrics that are climate adaptive. There's huge opportunity in textiles because climate is changing. We use textiles more because climate is changing, you know, curtains or clothes, cooling. How can we use the college resources to make fabrics cooler, warmer, more comfortable? So we collaborate with the college as well.
Interesting. Any last thoughts? I think we're just run out of time, but any last thoughts, Anand?
You know, I think that's something that we've all kind of agreed on is collaboration is here to stay. I mean, it's not a choice anymore. I mean, it's just that collaboration is going to ensure whether what we are doing 50 years later is going to be relevant to the society or not from a, NGO standpoint.
Absolutely. Bobby?
No, collaboration is the way forward, competition is not. And in this world where, everything is uncertain, it's more and more important that we collaborate.